Throughout the century that shaped how we once imagined the settling of the Americas, the story was simple. Early humans crossed from Siberia into Alaska over a vast land connection now called the Bering Land Bridge, then traveled south through an ice-free corridor between glaciers, and eventually gave rise to the Clovis culture, widely accepted once as the first inhabitants of the New World. For decades, textbooks described thousands of distinctive fluted spear points, especially from sites like Blackwater Draw in New Mexico, as the definitive signature of the earliest Americans. But in the closing decades of the 20th century and into the 21st, new discoveries began to unravel that tidy narrative. In 1997, excavations at Monteverde in southern Chile revealed human occupation dated to roughly 14,500 years ago, well before the widespread Clovis artifacts appeared across North America. Suddenly, people found evidence of humans deep in South America long before the famous first Americans were thought to have arrived. And Monteverde was not alone. Sites such as Paisley Caves in Oregon and Buttermilk Creek Complex near Dallas, Texas, have produced artifacts and dates that challenge the notion of Clovis as the first wave, pointing toward human presence 14,000 to over 15,000 years ago. These finds demanded a rethinking of how the first humans actually arrived. The traditional ice-free corridor, a strip of land between retreating glaciers, was once thought to open the path south by around 13,000 years ago. But paleoenvironmental studies, including genetic data from ancient lake sediments and bison migration patterns, show the corridor remained inhospitable scrubland until about 12,600 years ago, too late for the earliest well-documented humans. That raises a critical puzzle. How did people get into the Americas before the land corridor existed in a livable form? As scientists probed deeper, a different vision emerged. Early humans may have hugged the Pacific coastline, traveling along what's often called the Kelp Highway. Geological research published as recently as 2024 indicates that parts of the coastal route, especially around islands of southern Alaska's archipelago, became ice-free and potentially habitable by humans some 17,000 years ago. These island chains, rich in marine life, kelp forests, and coastal resources, could have supported small, maritime-adapted bands traveling by foot and rudimentary watercraft. Such a journey would accommodate the early dates in southern Chile and Oregon long before the interior corridor opened. Genetic research adds further support to this maritime plus land migration narrative. A seminal study of 2008 of mitochondrial DNA, or mtDNA, from modern indigenous American populations traced their ancestry to a single founding population that diverged from northeastern Asian groups. That divergence likely occurred during the height of the last ice age, roughly 23,000 to 19,000 years ago, when sea levels were low enough to expose Beringia and create a genetic bottleneck. The same study noted a population expansion between about 18,000 and 15,000 years ago, a time frame that aligns with emerging archaeological and geological evidence for coastal migration. This suggests that a relatively small group may have paused on Beringia for millennia, then expanded rapidly once environmental conditions allowed movement south, perhaps first along the coast, then eventually inland. Moreover, ancient DNA studies of mobile megafauna such as bison, combined with environmental reconstructions, show that the interior corridor didn't support sustainable ecosystems until significantly later than previously assumed. That strengthens the case that the first Americans bypassed the interior until climatic and ecological changes made it viable. Archaeologists also point out that the technologies used by pre-Clovis inhabitants differ sharply from Clovis tools. At Buttermilk Creek and other early sites, lithic artifacts tend to be smaller, lighter, and more expedient, likely parts of a mobile hunter-gatherer toolkit optimized for a coastal or water-edge lifestyle, rather than the heavy spear points associated with mammoth hunting in open plains. Add to that the fact that much of the late Pleistocene coastline is now submerged, erasing key evidence, and it becomes easier to understand why traces of the earliest settlers were elusive for so long. Still, the emerging picture is not simple or uniform. While many experts now accept that humans reached the Americas before the rise of Clovis, there is less agreement on exactly how many migrations occurred, what routes they took, and how early they began. For example, the shelf-submerged coastal route remains difficult to verify archaeologically, and some scientists caution against over-interpreting sparse or ambiguous evidence. Alternative theories persist, including more controversial ideas such as a transatlantic entry via the so-called Solutrean hypothesis, which posits that people from Ice Age Europe may have crossed the Atlantic by boat, but almost no genetic or archaeological consensus supports that notion today. At the same time, some regions within the Americas hint at even greater antiquity. For instance, bones and possible butchering marks from megafauna, along with ancient tools, have surfaced in sites dating more than 15,000 years old, suggesting that humanity's march into the New World may have started far earlier than 18,000 years ago, perhaps during a pre-Beringian phase, when people lived and adapted on the exposed landmass itself. This raises another tantalizing possibility, that early human groups could have lingered in Beringia for millennia, isolated from both Eurasian and later American populations, developing unique adaptations before dispersing when sea levels rose. As evidence mounts, from stone tools to ancient DNA, from submerged coastlines to ecological reconstructions, the classic Clovis first story feels increasingly inadequate. Instead, we see a far richer, more complex narrative, one of multiple migrations, maritime and terrestrial routes, long periods of waiting, and rapid expansions, all shaped by melting ice, shifting shorelines, changing climates, and human resilience. For indigenous peoples living in the Americas today, this deeper timeline, stretching back tens of thousands of years, adds profound weight to their ancestral connection to the land. It underscores that their roots are not recent or truncated, but deeply embedded in glaciers, seas, forests, and plains. It suggests their ancestors were not a single wave of newcomers, but many diverse bands, each adapting to different landscapes, using different tools, traveling different paths, all contributing to the intricate tapestry of humanity's presence in the Americas. But the story is still unfinished. Vast swaths of ancient coastline lie underwater, many Paleo-American sites remain undiscovered, and genetic signatures of the earliest migrants may still lie waiting in permafrost or remote caves. As technology improves, better dating methods, underwater archaeology, advanced DNA sequencing, new chapters may emerge, rewriting the narrative yet again. But for now, one thing is clear. The Americas' unknown beginning is not a myth or a simple tale. It's a dynamic story, still unraveling, still challenging long-held assumptions, still honoring the ingenuity and endurance of those first settlers. And that's something worth remembering whenever we think back to the dawn of human life on this continent.